Hey guys, my name's Rebecca Green. I'm a divorce real estate expert and mom. And today I'm going to share a little bit about my own story. I work with people who are divorcing, and there's the logistic side of that, but there's also an emotional side of it. And so one of the biggest questions that I get is, what about my kids? What the heck do I do with my kids? Where are my kids going to live? What are they going to do? How are they going to function? I don't want them to have two houses. This sucks. The idea that my failure would affect my kids, it just was too much to process most days. I did not have the capacity to wrap my brain around what it would look like, what it would feel like, what my day in and day out would be. So it was easier to stay in the bad that I knew than to expose myself and my kids to the bad that I didn't know. And so I want to talk for just a little while today on what I feel at the end of that now. I've been divorced and separated from my husband for years, a couple of years. And so I want to talk about how it feels to me, how it see my kids showing up, and really what the other side of things could look like. So I have two children. The first time that I separated from their dad, they were young. And we separated and then we got back together. And that was a disaster. The reason it didn't go well the first time is we just didn't have a plan. It was emotional. So one of the things that I encourage all of my clients and friends who are going through divorce is you do need a plan. And you need a plan for personal safety. You need a plan for emotional safety. That's probably counseling or a group or friends who can support you in this. You need resources for financial safety and a plan for how you're actually going to do that. I'm here to tell you, you're going to be fine. You are going to have to do some things that you haven't done before, but that's okay. At the end of the day, the most important thing that you can do for your kids is get you in a good place because your life's about to look way different than it's ever looked. And that's different for you and that's different for your kids. But different isn't bad. It's just different. And part of the pain of divorce is separating yourself from all the stuff that used to be the good and the bad and reframing your mind that you're going to have a different life. But I will say the biggest thing that I did personally to help my kids was work on me. And for me, what that looked like was therapy appointments. I was in therapy every single week. I had a really good attorney who took time to listen to me, but also just gave me like the business end of the stick with being able to separate the idea that my divorce was different from my personal growth. It wasn't his job to do anything except get me to the end of what this was so I could start my life over. And I had some other really important people in my life where I didn't rely on an attorney to put my ex in his place or whatever the case may be. So for the kids, something that I think is really important is making sure that you're only sharing age appropriate content with them. And you can do a lot of research online about what is appropriate for the ages of each kid and how much or little to share in a divorce. In my situation, unfortunately, my kids were exposed to way more than they should have been. And it wasn't good. And it created a lot of problems up front. So one of the best policies that I have is getting on the same page with your co-parent about what's best for the kids. You know, there are things that kids can control in divorce and there are things that they can't control. And being really clear with the kids on what is something in their life that they get a say in and something that they don't get a say in is important. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. Hey guys, do you want to do a schedule of a 2-2-3 or 2-2-5-5, or do you want to go 7 on, 7 off? That's not a kid conversation. That's an adult conversation. Because what can happen for kids, and this is how a therapist explained it to me, what can happen for kids is when they make a decision, they understand the consequences are associated with their decision. So if you give them an ability to show up and make a decision on kid schedule, for example, which hopefully you're not doing that, then when it starts to feel sad and drop-offs are emotional or pickups are emotional, or there's a problem with a decision that's been made with a divorce, if a child has been put in the middle and make that decision themselves, they take on that guilt. Oh, the parenting schedule's frustrating mom again. I made that parent. Their kid head goes, wait a second, I chose that schedule. I remember when we sat down and talked about it. That's not, I made a bad decision, the guilt gets heaped on them. We don't want that. What you do want is to give them control over the things that they can control. And what I like to do is I like to call it out in the moment. This is a small one, but I asked my kids recently, hey, do you guys want to take your lunch to school? That's a good decision that you can control. Would you rather take your lunch or would you rather get school lunch this year? It's choosing little things in their life that normally might be like, hey, we're not buying school lunch. I want to do home lunch or whatever the case may be. But instead of imposing my opinion on a small place where they can have control, I like to give that to them. I'm also way more flexible now with like what my kids wear. Before, maybe I was laying out their clothes and making sure we matched. But what I like to do is to tell them, hey guys, you have control over what you wear. I'm really, whatever you want to wear, that's a great thing that you would get to control, not some of the other things that happen in divorce. And so in our house, we like to talk about adult decisions or kid decisions, adult conversations or kid conversations. And it leverages off some of the pressure that they have. Another thing that I'm very clear with my kids about is they have one job. In a divorced home, they have one job. And that job is just to be a kid. It's not their job to comfort mommy or daddy if they're sad. It's not their job to develop new relationships with new friends, whatever it is. Their one job is to be a kid. And I want them to focus on that. And so when they get emotional and upset, we sit down and we address those things. But also, sometimes I try to go in and get in their little brains and pull out the idea that, like, hey, that's not something you have to worry about, buddy. I understand why you're stressed out by that idea or thought or decision. You're stressed out because that's not a decision that an 8-year-old brain needs to make. And so having some rhetoric and language like that around your kids, especially if you can get on the same page with your co-parents, some of those phrases that they hear in both houses can be very, very important in setting your kids up to be able to feel like they have control over some things, and then just making peace with, it's a hard thing to do and adults have to do it too, but making peace with the idea that we can't control everything. So hopefully that's helpful. A couple of conversations that I like to have with my kids. If you have any other ideas or advice, please feel free to comment on the video. It's helpful as you're going through and watching this to hear what other people are experiencing and similar stories. Any other topics you'd like to hear me talk about, throw those in the comments as well.